All right, well, many thanks to our partners from India and China. This is obviously, as we've been talking today, this is a very transnational issue, and the fact that we have good contacts in those countries makes a big difference. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dan Burke, and I'm with the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations, and I'm the program manager for the Cybercrime Enforcement Unit. It's a specific unit dedicated to investigating, among other things, illegal online drug distribution networks. And we have today a very distinguished panel to talk about, I know the issue a lot of you are very interested in is the impacts of fake online pharmacies in patient safety. So to my left here is Todd Brown. Todd is the executive director of the Massachusetts Independent Pharmacists Association, excuse me, and then Libby Bainey. Libby is the executive director of the Alliance for Safe Online Pharmacies, and to Libby's left is Ken McCall, but we call him Mac, right? Mac is president of the Maine Pharmacy Association and an associate professor in the Department of Pharmacy Practice at the University of New England. So thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. Many of you have probably seen the commercials, dietary supplements and whatnot, and you know, the supplement talks about how it can, you know, cure certain disease or aid, you know, prevent some sort of disease, and there's a disclaimer at the bottom. I don't know if you've ever seen this disclaimer. I always look. You have to squint to see it. But it says, these statements not evaluated by the FDA, this product not intended to diagnose, cure, or prevent any disease. And you've seen that, even though they just sort of, but so before I administer the verbal sedative that I'm going to administer right now, hopefully it's not enough, I actually come with my own disclaimer. So my disclaimer is that I'm not speaking on behalf of the FDA, and that the views that I'm going to express are mine and do not necessarily reflect the views of the agency or the US government. So with that said, let's talk about the impacts of fake online pharmacies or online drug distribution networks. 2014 has marked yet another year of frustration in the fight against illegal online drug sellers. We've had our successes, and we've talked about them today, our arrests, seizures, takedowns, and convictions. But when I sat down to write this, when I sat down to reflect upon the true magnitude of the problem, the overwhelming ease at which criminal organizations can call themselves pharmacists, and in some cases, pharmacists becoming part of criminal organizations, I know everybody in this room, can do more. Over the past few years, we've seen a number of health benefit plans, particularly in Maine, Massachusetts, and New York, turn to supposed, quote, Canadian online pharmacies to source cheaper drugs, not from Canada in most instances, but from sources in countries such as India, China, Pakistan, and Turkey. I've heard the arguments that the high costs of medications is driving consumers to look for cheaper options on the internet. I get it. I'm a consumer too. I don't want to pay more than I should for medications found elsewhere for much cheaper. And years of free market experience tells us that competition is good for the consumer. But years of public health experience, beginning with the snake oil salesman of the Old West, also tells us that the manufacture and distribution of pharmaceuticals must be regulated to protect the consumer. Buying pharmaceuticals is not caveat emptor, or buyer beware. It is caveat vendidor, or let the seller beware. The Ryan Haight Online Pharmacy Consumer Protection Act of 2008 gave the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration powerful tools to fight the distribution of controlled substances online. But perhaps even more sinister is the growing distribution of non-controlled pharmaceuticals that threaten the integrity of our supply chain, and our legislative and investigative tools need to be strengthened in this area. Consumers who buy any drug online have no idea the source of that medication. In our investigations, we have received drugs from online sources that are sub or super potent, counterfeit, have no active pharmaceutical ingredient, drugs tainted with poisons such as lead and arsenic, drugs contaminated with mold, substitute drugs, drugs that are not yet controlled but have addictive qualities, drugs that are new and untested but sold anyway, cold chain drugs that are not stored or transported, and stolen drugs. Consumers have no recourse if they don't receive the therapeutic benefit promised, and even determining this is difficult if the person doesn't drop dead right there. The taxpayers of this country pay the FDA to ensure that drugs are safe and effective for their intended use. that the processes and facilities used to manufacture these products are free of contamination, and that the supply chain remains stable and intact. In short, we are first and foremost a consumer protection agency. The taxpayers of this country pay me and the very capable special agents of our Cybercrime Investigations Unit to bring to justice those that place profits over public health and completely disregard, through the operation of supposed online pharmacies, the important consumer safety mission of the FDA. So let me explain how we in the FDA are focused on the problem. Our Center for Drug Evaluation and Research is actively engaged in getting the word out through educational campaigns such as the Be Safe RX campaign and through consumer advisories, warning letters, and alerts. Our Division of Import Operations works daily with U.S. Customs and Border Protection to identify and seize drugs illegally imported into the United States through global efforts such as Operation Pangea and Operation Safeguard. My office, the Office of Criminal Investigations, is tackling this issue through the specialized work of our Cybercrime Investigations Unit, and we are engaged on all fronts. We target the supporting infrastructure from filing abuse complaints to registrars that seem to cater to illegal online pharmacies, to complaints to ICANN when they fail to respond. We have investigated companies like UPS, Google, FedEx, and we are targeting the financial infrastructure that support those that profit off the sick and most vulnerable. We're also focusing the bulk of our investigative resources to bring to justice those that operate large online pharmacy networks, most of which operate outside of the United States. These networks are the central operators of the estimated 30 to 50,000 illegal, quote, online pharmacies active at any one time. The proliferation of purported Canadian online pharmacies continues to be a problem, and our efforts to ensure the integrity of our drug and medical device supply chain. Some organizations, mostly from outside the United States, advocate for supposed Canadian online pharmacies that completely disregard U.S. laws and regulations. They want us to just trust them to regulate the U.S. supply chain. They promote websites that say they are run by, quote, licensed Canadian pharmacists, but what they fail to say is that they are not at all operating under the authority of their provincial pharmacy license. This is even a violation of Canadian law. According to Health Canada, quote, it is a violation of the Food and Drugs Act and the Food and Drug Regulations to advertise or sell at retail or via the internet drugs that are not approved for sale in Canada. This applies to all Canadian pharmacies selling over the internet, even in cases where the unapproved drugs do not enter Canada but are dispensed by foreign pharmacies and delivered to patients outside of Canada. Pharmacies licensed in Canada that engage in such activity are considered to be advertising and selling unapproved drugs in Canada. Many of these supposed Canadian online pharmacies rarely distribute drugs from Canada, but hide behind a global distribution network, making it appear the drugs are from, say, the European supply chain, but are often sourced elsewhere. They sell from websites that are either not accessible in Canada or use IP address geolocation tactics to sell different medications to Canadian residents, and they also offer no recourse to U.S. residents in the case of an adverse event. This is a fraud on the U.S. consumer, our regulatory system, and the result to the American taxpayer is the expenditure of thousands of hours of investigative work with tens of thousands of U.S. taxpayer dollars as our agents attempt to unravel the clandestine and unregulated supply chain when their cheaply sourced drugs do harm to U.S. consumers. This is Betty Hunter. Betty Hunter and her grandson, Michael Lehan, at his high school graduation in 2008. Betty was a lung cancer patient. In May 2011, Ms. Hunter went to Four Winds Hematology and Oncology in Chandler, Arizona, for an infusion of what she believed was Avastin, a drug she had taken previously. Soon after the infusion began, Ms. Hunter started to shake and became nauseous and feverish. The nurse reported in her chart, quote, patient complaining of feeling very jittery, hands shaking, and appeared to be red in face. Doctor notified, and infusion stopped. Patient given Benadryl. Like Ms. Hunter, another patient named Wanda Young also had a bad reaction to Avastin. The attending nurse noted in the report, quote, patient complaining of shakiness in hands, Benadryl given, needle removed. The drug Ms. Hunter and Ms. Young received was stamped Altazan, the Turkish brand name for Avastin. Our agents subsequently searched Four Winds Hematology and Oncology the result of an unrelated tip. There, we seized Altazan vials supplied by OCI Pharma in Turkey via a company known as Richards Pharma in the United Kingdom. The Altazan was found to be counterfeit, containing water and mold, but none of the drug's active ingredient. Our investigation showed that OCI Pharma sold the fake Altazan to Richards Pharma in 2011. When Richard Taylor, owner of Richards Pharma, discovered it was fake and U.S. patients had bad reactions, he tried to send the remaining vials back to OCI Pharma, and they refused. Richard Taylor then sold the remaining vials to River East Supply in England. River East Supply is a subsidiary of Canada Drugs. River East Supply then shipped those same counterfeit Altazan vials back to the U.S. At the time, Canada Drugs' U.S. supply and distribution chain involved a myriad of subsidiaries and reshippers, including Montana Healthcare Solutions, Rockley Ventures, QSP, and Volunteer Distribution. When interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, employees of Canada Drugs acknowledged shipping fake Altazan, but say they weren't aware it was a counterfeit. And according to the fine print disclaimer on their website, it's not their problem. This past January, undercover OCI agents working with international partners from Germany and Europol met Özkan Samazoglu and Sabahattin Akman, owners of OCI Pharma, at a hotel in Puerto Rico after they flew to the United States from Turkey. After a lengthy meeting with the undercover agents, Samazoglu and Akman were arrested. Both have since pleaded guilty to charges of smuggling misbranded and adulterated Altazan to the United States and are set to be sentenced on November 18th. In their plea agreements, both admitted to distributing the Altazan contaminated with water and mold. Ever since the infusions of fake Altazan in May 2011, OCI agents have spent the past several years investigating this complex distribution scheme involving a myriad of front companies, foreign wholesalers, and illegal online pharmacies. Although our investigation is clearly ongoing, the dogged investigative work of our dedicated special agents has led to the arrest and conviction of 14 other persons in a series of related cases. But as you see here, Canada Drugs still sources its foreign drugs through their subsidiary, Rivers East Supply. Our investigations have shown that many of these illegal online pharmacies use what they call fulfillment centers to make it appear to the U.S. consumer that the drugs are from the pharmaceutical supply chains of countries such as the UK, Singapore, or Australia. However, many fulfillment centers are simply mechanisms to circumvent customs laws by enabling the importation of diverted drugs for reconditioning and export. Yet another layer in an esoteric supply chain. Did the owners of OCI Pharma, Four Winds Hematology and Oncology, Richards Pharma, River East Supply, Canada Drugs, or any of their subsidiaries or distributors report these problems or adverse events to the FDA? The answer is no, they did not. So I ask you, how much more of this is going on that we don't know about? How many of these cheaply sourced drugs are manufactured in facilities like this or like this? We have no idea. There are literally thousands of illegal online pharmacy websites that have bought off on the idea that Americans will trust an online drug merchant with a maple leaf on its website. Americans simply trust our neighbor to the north, and it's this goodwill that is being exploited. Show me the bodies. That's what I constantly hear. If there's such a problem with online pharmacies, Dan, then show me the bodies. Bodies, I ask? People generally don't just drop dead when they take a drug that does not have a therapeutic benefit. Haven't we learned from history, from years of public health experience? Show me the bodies. If that's what it takes for government, industry, the internet ecosystem, lobbyists, payment processors, financial institutions, and shipping companies, if that is what it takes to make them understand the public health emergency that we face by the reckless distribution of drugs online and the total disregard for U.S. laws and the regulatory system, then I want you to please listen to Daniel Weinstein.
911 emergency, please?
Yes, my wife overdosed, and I think she passed away. I think she's dead. 2563.
What's your name, sir?
My name is Daniel Weinstein.
Okay.
Phone. I'm sorry.
Not breathing at all?
Should I call you back on our home?
No, not at all, not at all.
Okay. She's definitely dead.
Okay. Don't touch anything. We're gonna send people there too. How old is she?
She is 55. She's had a history of drug abuse and problems. I left 3 days ago because I was tired of her drug abuse. And she's dead. I can see the lividity. She's dead.
Okay. Daniel, take a deep breath. I'm getting you some help, okay?
I've got my friend who's an ex-police officer on the way as well.
Where's the police officer at?
The police officer, he's an ex-police officer. His name's Steve Baker. He's on his way over from Menifee. He'll be here in about 5 minutes.
Okay. How long have you been there for?
I just walked in.
And you called him first?
Yes, I called him and I said, I think she's dead. Can you come? And then he said, dial 911. And I said, okay. And I dialed 911.
Okay.
You there?
I'm here. Hold on just a second,
Okay.
Daniel. I'm here. Okay. What's her name?
Her name is Cheryl Weinstein.
What's her date of birth, Daniel?
3/10/56.
Okay. We're sending you some help, okay? Okay, Daniel. Thank you.
On March 11th, 2011, Daniel came home to find his wife Cheryl dead from an overdose of carosprotol that she purchased from the online pharmacy topills.com. In 2011, carosprotol was not yet a controlled substance. As it remains today, carosprotol is widely distributed on the internet, and this particular version was not approved for use in the United States. After her death, Daniel was harassed by telephone calls asking Cheryl to buy more. Her inbox contained hundreds of emails offering her drugs of all kinds. Cheryl was a wife, a mother, a friend to many, and her family selflessly gave me permission to play this for you today in the hope that you will understand their absolute grief and frustration that we, all of us in this room today, can stop talking about the problem and in some cases stop being part of the problem and do something about it. Caveat venditor. Let the seller beware. I'm here to let the seller beware that FDA will continue this fight and we will continue to seek justice for victims like Cheryl Weinstein, Wanda Young, and Betty Hunter. I'm now going to turn to our distinguished panel members for a discussion about their important research, which will shed further light on this topic. Ken, I'll first start with you, Mac, sorry. In April of this year, Mac filed a complaint with the Maine Attorney General after ordering medications from a Canadian online pharmacy called Canada Drug Center and receiving medications from India, Turkey, and Mauritius. Mac, I'll turn the podium over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to join you today and speak on behalf of the Maine Pharmacy Association at this important conference. When I leave my home in Portland, Maine and come to Washington, D.C., my wife usually says that the average intelligence of both places increases. So anyway, just to give you a little bit of background, by the way, in 2012, CannaRx was going to enter into a contract with Maine Employees Association to provide to import prescription drugs to our state employees. And when that news came to my attention, I wrote a letter of complaint to our Attorney General, then Attorney General William Schneider. My complaint centered around the illegality of that contract and of those services, and the Attorney General in 2012 agreed with our complaint and ordered CannaRx to cease and desist. And then in 2013, in Maine's 126th legislative session, two bills were introduced. This is one of them that's before you. Two bills were introduced to enable the importation of prescription drugs. And despite our significant efforts to educate and warn legislators about the safety risks, this bill that you're looking at passed. And Maine, at that time in 2013, became the first state to enact a drug importation ordinance. Let me go into a little bit more about the details of this drug importation ordinance, and we're already seeing this mirrored in other legislators, by the way. Just last year, In South Carolina, there was S1113, which was a copy of our bill for the most part. But the way our language is worded in the second paragraph, it refers to a licensed retail pharmacy that is located in Canada, the United Kingdom of Great Britain, well, maybe after today, the former United Kingdom, but anyway, Northern Ireland, the Commonwealth of Australia or New Zealand, that meets its country's statutory and regulatory requirements may export prescription drugs by mail or carrier to a resident of Maine for that resident's personal use. And notice this last sentence, though. A licensed retail pharmacy described in this paragraph is exempt from licensure under this act. And that's very concerning because, you know, who's checking? Who's providing oversight? What are the regulatory mechanisms to ensure public safety? There's absolutely no accountability. In the second paragraph, it refers to an entity that contracts to provide or facilitate the exportation of prescription drugs from a licensed retail pharmacy described above, may provide or facilitate the provision of prescription drugs from that pharmacy by mail or carrier to a resident of Maine for that resident's personal use. Again, the last sentence in this paragraph is that this entity, which provides or facilitates the provision of prescription drugs, is exempt from licensure under this act. Again, there's absolutely no oversight, no accountability in this legislation in Maine, and there's no recourse for the patient who suffers harm. I don't know how they would take recourse against an unlicensed international entity. This law tears a huge hole in the secure drug supply chain in our state and in the United States. Now, this law took effect in October 2013, and very shortly after, CannaRx resumed operations in Maine. But we knew this was always bigger than CannaRx. We knew that other entities would enter the open market. So, for example, in November of 2013, CanadaDrugCenter.com ran this half-page ad in the Portland Press Herald and the Kennebec Journal, advertising for Canadian and international prescription services. And you saw in the advertisement that they referred to several credentials. And I wanted to talk about that a moment, because this is important to me, how these websites portray themselves. Because I've encountered, as I've talked to legislators in my state, as I've talked to patients, as I've talked to my colleagues who are prescribers, our physicians, I've encountered a myth that if the website is certified and verified, then it must be safe. And these are often used, the pharmacychecker.com, the CIPA-RX, and the IPA-BC. And earlier, we heard it said that if you put a maple leaf on it, if it's red and white, it sells. And that's true, and that's why they're used. The FDA sent out a press release June 27th, 2013, when they seized and shut down over 1,600 illegal websites. And in their own wording, many of these websites falsely purported to be Canadian pharmacies. These websites displayed fake licenses and certifications to convince U.S. consumers to purchase drugs. The bottom line is that pharmacychecker.com is a private for-profit company. They charged CanadaDrugCenter.com or other entities, they charge routinely $367 non-refundable fee to apply and then a $110 monthly fee thereafter. It's a pay-to-play. And there are additional charges if you want to be listed on their pharmacy ratings page. But it is by no means a regulatory entity that has any public members that oversees the safety of our citizens. Also, the CIP-RX, the IPA-BC, they have no regulatory authority in Canada or British Columbia. These are .coms. You can go to their websites. But they certainly do not license pharmacists, and they certainly do not license pharmacies, and they don't license any healthcare entities. I also, as I did a little bit more exploration on CanadaDrugCenter.com, I found them listed on NABP's not recommended sites because they are one of the sites that puts you and your family at risk, according to NABP. So I went further. I went to the website to explore, and I created a profile for myself, and I actually placed an order for 3 prescription products: generic Plavix, generic clopidogrel, generic celecoxib, generic Nexium, esomeprazole. You know, it's interesting, though, as you go through the process, there is a client agreement that you have to sign off on. And it's also interesting that within the agreement, they assign you what they refer to as a Canadian or international physician. So I have my own personal physician in Maine, but now I guess I have a Canadian or international physician as well. I've never met him or her, but this is what the agreement says. It also says in the agreement that you and your heirs, okay, my heirs too, waive any liability, claim, loss, damage, or expense of any kind or nature caused directly or indirectly by any inadequacy, deficiency, or unsuitability of any prescription issued. Ultimately, products like this, you know, one of my concerns is who is really liable? Not if, but when something goes wrong. What recourse does the patient have? And a lot of our physicians really are unaware that they are probably the most liable person in this practice. Because if they issue a prescription to an international broker like this one, they are probably the most liable. I mean, certainly the unlicensed foreign entity is probably one of the least liable when something goes wrong. I wanted to show you, as these products were delivered to me, the packaging and labeling. Now, the first product that I ordered, as I said, was generic Plavix, clopidogrel. What I received was Clopivis 75. This is a picture of the product, the packaged pills. It is labeled clopidogrel 75 milligrams. Now, I've been a pharmacist for 18 years. I'm unfamiliar with these prescription products you're about to see, so these were new to me. But you know, one of the myths that I've also seen prevalent in our state is that I can tell if these imported prescriptions are the real thing. I hear a lot of patients, I've even heard a legislator when I've testified in committee say, I know what my medicines look like, and that's a common myth. And unfortunately, many physicians and patients who use these services are blindly trusting a profit-driven, unregulated, foreign entity. Here's another picture. The Nexium product was sent to me. ISRA 20 was the brand name, also labeled as esomeprazole. And again, that's a picture of the packaging and the tablet itself outside of the packaging. The third product here is the generic Celebrex, celecoxib, Cobix 200, as it's labeled on this package, just to give you an idea of the products here. And you know what? As I look at these in my own mailbox, what strikes me is that now pharmacists, nurses, physicians, when we reconcile a patient's medication list, when we go through a complete medication review, we now must include within that process, we need to be aware and we need to determine the source of those medicines. We cannot assume that they are FDA-approved medicines that our patients are taking. Physicians need to include the real possibility of substandard or counterfeit medications in their diagnostic differential. None of the physicians I've talked to do that routinely at all. If a patient on Plavix suffers a heart attack, they assume it was a therapeutic failure. They don't question, was the medication substandard? Was it counterfeit? Our hospitals and emergency departments are not equipped with the analytical tools necessary to determine those findings. Maybe they need to be in this age. So when you look at all three of these products, the source, the manufacturers are listed here. All three were manufactured in India. The fill centers, you know, these are not necessarily pharmacies. The fill centers, and I have to admit, my geography isn't that good. I did not know where Mauritius was located, but it's off the coast of Madagascar, so I had to look that one up. So the fill centers in Mauritius, Delhi, and Istanbul, respectively, and then the last mailing address that was on the package that arrived at my home. So this gives you an idea, and you know, the takeaway is that none of these products were sourced or filled or distributed. None of these were licensed for use in Canada. They have nothing to do with Canada. And there's just a common myth in our state that if it's good enough for Canadians, well, it's good enough for Mainers. And, you know, the idea is that if it's the same as getting on a bus and driving up to New Brunswick or Quebec and having your prescriptions filled by a licensed pharmacist in one of those Canadian territories at a licensed pharmacy in one of those territories. And this is obviously not the case at all. None of these products are FDA approved. None of them are approved for use in Canada's health system either. Oh, that's all? Okay, I thought we had more. Okay, well, the key findings, you know, as I looked into this further, were that CanadaDrugCenter.com, like CannaRx, is not a licensed pharmacy. They do not dispense prescriptions to Canadians. As I mentioned, NABP's website lists both of these entities on their not recommended sites because it's a risk for you and your family. None of the 3 prescriptions that I ordered were sourced, manufactured, distributed, or filled in Canada. All 3 of the prescriptions that were delivered to me are unapproved FDA products, violate federal law, and even violate Maine's new public law, for which I filed a complaint to our Maine Board of Pharmacy. This year, you know, I will say lawmakers in Maine are beginning to listen to these concerns, which means either my advocacy skills are getting better or more likely it's an election year. But, you know, I wanted to mention, I thought I had it up here and I apologize that it's not, but there was one other product that I wanted to talk about briefly. WGME News in Portland, Maine brought us a product that they ordered right after our new state law took effect in October last year. This has been reported already online with WGME News. But they ordered Viagra online, and what was delivered to them, and I've got pictures if you want to see that, I can show you, was Fildina by brand name. But it was labeled as sildenafil citrate 50 milligrams. And this product that WGME News brought to us, they asked our lab at the UNE College of Pharmacy to analyze it. And when we analyzed the product, we found that whereas it was labeled as 50 milligrams, it in fact had less than 7 milligrams of active ingredient. And you might think that less than 7 milligrams of sildenafil citrate would probably not cause much harm. But in fact, who knows the repercussions? I mean, the most likely scenario is the patient will suffer a therapeutic failure, go back to the physician and say, that didn't work. And the physician, like I said, is not going to think in a differential that the medication is substandard. The most likely reaction is the physician's going to prescribe 100 milligrams of sildenafil citrate. Then if the patient gets the actual ingredient that they've been prescribed, actually what the doctor ordered, they could pass out or have a cardiovascular event. So my point is that this is just not what your doctor ordered. And our concerns going forward are that the state law, we believe, violates federal law. We have, in fact, filed a lawsuit against our state, which is still pending. And so that sort of brings you up to date with events in Maine, I think.
Great, Mac. Well,
okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Oh, there it is. Okay.
I'm next going to introduce Libby Bain. I don't think there we go. Libby Bainey. Libby currently serves as the founding executive director for the Alliance for Safe Online Pharmacies. It's a global, active nonprofit organization. It's based right here in Washington, D.C., but your knowledge factor that goes way up when you're in town, right? So in this capacity, Libby leads ASOP's operations. She shapes public policy and advocates for increased international attention to the issue of illegal online drug sellers. So Libby, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, everybody. I'm really glad to be back here. I always look forward to this event, and I know next year's event is already on my calendar. I hope it's on yours. This is a really great opportunity for me to be on such a distinguished panel, and Dan, thanks for the good comments to introduce the session today. I'm going to talk about the work of the Alliance, but give a little context about the public health perspective and the patient's perspective on these issues. And so to kick that off, I'm going to ask a survey question. How many of you bought something, anything, online? Anybody that's never bought anything online? Is there anybody that's never purchased a product on the internet? Okay, so 100% of us have bought something. I won't ask the obvious question if you bought your medicine because no one would admit it in this group. Have you asked your loved ones if they've bought medicine online? How many have asked their loved ones? All right, so less than 50%. And I asked that because a couple years ago, you probably were here, you heard my talk about my sister's incident where she had purchased medicine online. Her doctor had advised her to do so, and she's fortunately back healthy and okay. But as you saw, I think it was one of Mac's slides, there was a picture of CanadaDrugCenter.com and it had a little box of Allegra. That was what she got on the internet. And so we all have a story. Half of us have asked our family members. I urge the other half of us to go ask our family members. Where are you sourcing your medicines? As you heard from Mac, doctors may not ask that question. We need to make sure that we are our own advocates in this fight too, because as Dan said, it should be caveat venditor, but right now it's caveat emptor. And we need to have our own advocacy for our own health until and unless we can help start taking these illegal drug sellers accountable. And we're doing that through the good work of FDA. We're doing that through the good work of Mac and his work. And we're doing that internationally through the Alliance and others. But I'm sincere in asking you to, and please ask your family members and your loved ones where they're sourcing their medicines. Because we're all, 100% of us, are buying things online. And we may not think that vitamin or that prescription is harmful. And it's easy to source. And it looks legitimate. The sites, as you've seen, they look legitimate. And they're certainly not, as we know. So what else do we know? We know, as Dan mentioned, that 30 to 40, 50,000 active online drug sellers operating at any one time. This number changes because websites come up and down. Network gets taken down by an operation. It pops back up on another registrar. So the number fluctuates. So we don't have a crisp number, and if I told you one today, it would change tomorrow. But approximately 40 to 50,000 active online drug sellers operating at any one time. 97% of those, you've heard me say this before, 97% of those websites are not in compliance with U.S. Pharmacy laws and practice standards. That's a statistic that bears out globally. We're doing research. We've done research in Japan. We're doing research currently in China. We've done research in the EU. That's a statistic that bears out globally. So if you think you're safe in another country, you're not. The laws are being violated there too. And we've seen this before, 50% of online drug sellers that hide their physical address are selling counterfeits. WHO's research there. What else do we know? We know from NABP that the illegal online drug sellers are the most frequent conduit of counterfeit medicines. We've talked a lot about the harms that these websites can cause, but we also know that they are the most prevalent place for counterfeit drugs. And I pause for a moment because I and many in this room have spent a lot of time on track and trace, both in the U.S. and in other places. And I applaud that legislation, and I think we all do. And many in this room are working actively, diligently, day by day to try to implement that law, to add serialization, and to comply with those laws in not only the U.S. but other jurisdictions. And that's a great thing. But it doesn't do anything for the internet. So let's just think about that. The amount of time and energy industry and pharmacy and wholesalers are spending to implement these laws is phenomenal. But that's the safest place we have for drugs right now, and we're not touching the internet. And as we look, as NABP has said, it's the most frequent source of counterfeits. So we need to do more there. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what the Alliance is doing and with our partners and others. FDA has found 23% of adult consumers have purchased medicine online. That was from 2012, and that was actually a statistic that FDA rolled out at the interchange a couple years ago. 23% of consumers a couple years ago, 100% of us are buying things online right now. You can assume that statistic may be increasing, but at least it's 1 in 4. Illegal online drug sellers make lots of money. That's a no-brainer. They wouldn't be in this game if it wasn't lucrative. There's a lot of money to be made. I'll just gloss over this because we all know the risks, right? They're selling prescription-only medicines without a prescription, selling unapproved, adulterated, substandard, stolen, counterfeit, not regulated products, and don't have the required pharmacy licenses and the jurisdictions where they ship to. A fake pharmacy license. Those are easy to do. I could make one on my Microsoft Word if I get back to my office, right? I mean, anybody can fake this type of stuff. We can copy paste. It's very simple, and with computer technology these days, I can copy a seal from almost anywhere or make up my own seal, and who's going to know the difference? Headlines just from August and September of this year. One of the things that the Alliance tries to do is capture global data on this issue. I'd like to say that we have the largest database on internet drug sales. I imagine there are things we miss. So when I miss a fact, I do apologize for that, but I unfortunately don't speak as many languages as I should for this issue. But for those languages I do speak, we do collect these data, and we try to make it available to our partners and to our members, and certainly to anybody that needs this information. We found just recent headlines the last couple months, I believe they are in chronological order, a woman buying medicine online for IVF drugs sold illegally on eBay. Anybody that suffered with infertility knows that these drugs are very, very, very expensive. I've participated, I serve on the Public Policy Committee of Resolve, a patient advocacy organization that deals with infertility issues. I've seen firsthand what patients will say in chat forums. Oh, you need this drug, it's really expensive, get it from this website. That's terrifying to me. You're spending thousands of dollars on the doctor visits, but you're willing to take a risk with your public health, with your health, and potentially the life of your unborn child by taking medicine online. You're seeing family accused of selling erectile dysfunction medicines. That's just recent headlines I'm sure you've seen. The medicines putting people in risk in the UK, more and more happening over there, as well as in Korea. They're talking about the increased risk. I think it was almost 150% increase of drugs purchased online in Korea from 2012 to 2013, and that was a statistic that was borne out in the recent article. So examples of a couple other patients harmed. Laura Lambden, UK physician's assistant, working very diligently in her job, had trouble sleeping. These are tough times. We all have trouble. Sometimes things keep us awake. So she goes online and buys some medicine. Tries to think that this will help her get a good night's sleep so she can go back to work and continue to serve the public health interest. She bought unapproved sleeping pills. Again, these things, it's not like it's branded and says this is an unapproved pill on the website. It just says sleeping pills, get your medicine here. As a consumer, first of all, you're tired, you're working double shifts, you don't know what exactly you need, but you know that you need something. You probably did a search and something comes up and says, oh, this looks good. You don't know what it is, and unfortunately she did pass away. That's the type of thing that is happening over and over again, and like Dan said, I get asked pretty much on a daily basis, show me the bodies. And if we could be very rich from getting asked that question and getting $1 for every time I get asked that. And it makes me want to vomit because it's asking us to agree to do something only when people are falling dead in the street. Only then is it important enough to do something. Only then is it important enough for the internet commerce companies to get involved. That's not okay. That's not okay. Ask the families of these victims. Ask ourselves and consider your loved ones. You don't want to be that person that had to wait and ask their family members or have to use the story to create advocacy or to create awareness in a state like Maine or internationally as we're trying to do. Marcia, another example, bought medicine online and without a prescription. And unfortunately, she also died from heavy metal poisoning, as you heard, lead and arsenic in the pills, as well as Stephen Kovacs, another example of someone that's had drug-seeking behavior in this case, but bought medicine online and overdosed. So like the example that Dan showed, there are lots of ramifications from this. It could be you just want to self-prescribe. It could be that you had a chronic disease like Marcia, who just needed some additional assistance for that disease, thought she could get it cheaper, better, easier, faster. It could be that you have a drug-seeking behavior, and you just want to be able to bypass the doctor-patient relationship in order to get that. So I've talked a lot about the doom and gloom, how it doesn't get much worse than talking about people dying, right? So where's the bright side in all of this? What can we possibly do about this problem? We've got resource constraints domestically and internationally. It would be great to have 500 more Dan Burkes out there policing the internet and on the streets. We don't. And so we have to collaborate on this, and we're pleased to do so through the Alliance and the work that we do with Partnership for Safe Medicines and other like-minded organizations to try to protect patients both domestically and internationally. So I'm going to leave you with 5 signs we're making an impact. I ask you to challenge me on this. Let's talk. Let's have a dialogue in the panel and say what else should we be doing. And I will tell you, I hear a lot of things that need to be done, and we take that back as an organization. So if you've got ideas, let's talk and think about what ways we can make a better impact. But 5 examples. 5 signs we're making an impact. Internet commerce companies agree to take voluntary actions. This is a slow process. As Dan, if anybody knows, this is a long-term game. We're not going to get the Googles of the world to change their minds unless they're sometimes, and have been in the past, encouraged by law enforcement action, which has turned them to a complete 180 on their actions and are now doing some really great things in the search advertising space. Natural search results is a separate issue, and we can talk about that too. But we've seen Visa has recently issued an internet compliance or internet pharmacy guide for acquirers, publicly available on their website. I encourage you to just go to a search engine right now and search for that. It's a very long document that's very detailed about how a payment processor is taking action into their own hands and then pushing this back into their networks to the merchant banks and the accounts to say, well, you have a responsibility to do due diligence. It's a good first step. There's more to be done, but it's a good first step. CSIP, the Center for Safe Internet Pharmacies, a group that's a nonprofit organization that has internet commerce company members. They have issued what they call principles of participation. I'll call them best practices. It's a document publicly available on their website that says what we, the internet commerce companies, can do and are doing to protect patients proactively, voluntarily, without a court order. We need more of that, because we can't always be going and asking courts for action on these things. It's too fast. You've heard from the law enforcement panel how hard it is to get some of these things done. We need more voluntary action from internet commerce companies, and I'm very proud to say that CSIP, the nonprofit, has issued a public document, something that we're trying to leverage internationally to get additional companies to sign on to that. Real-Time Registrar BV, a Netherlands-based registrar, has also voluntarily agreed to change their practices. They're decided to lock and suspend domain names that are using the domain names for illegal purposes to sell online drugs. That's a great thing. That's more of what we need. That's one example. There are thousands of registrars based offshore collecting licensing fees from rogue online drug sellers. We can't allow that in the internet commerce community. As Dan said, we need to go do more with ICANN as well. But we do see some bright spots here where companies are voluntarily taking actions. We also see clustering, because when companies start voluntarily taking actions, the rogue sellers say, oh, crap, now I don't have a safe haven for my activity. What am I going to do? And they go to the registrars that are either knowingly or negligently facilitating illegal activity and are saying, okay, great, come on in. I'll take your money. You can have a safe haven in my registrar. We won't ask questions. We'll just take your fees. These are them. This is data courtesy of one of our board members, LegitScript, and they work with a number of organizations internationally to track the networks, the criminal networks, I should say. And these are the worst of the worst in terms of harboring those rogue internet pharmacies. So what else are we doing to make an impact? We've seen that the Transatlantic IPR Working Group, Intellectual Property Rights Working Group, has prioritized the issue of internet pharmacies. That's a great thing for us, because as we've heard, this is an international issue. And so to have transatlantic cooperation at the highest government levels starting to take this on as a problem and as something that they want to solve collectively in partnership is, I think it's a really big win for us. It creates an opportunity to do more transatlantically on law enforcement, on information sharing, to follow up on leads, and to educate consumers. And so we are doing that, and we're pleased to be working with USTR, ICE, Commerce, CBP, the DG Sanko marked trade of the world, so we can be better educating patients transatlantically, and more importantly, doing more from a law enforcement perspective as these criminals are international. I should also mention, number 3, that APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, has launched an Internet Sales Working Group, and the Alliance is working on a daily basis almost with these APEC economies, surveying APEC economies, there's 21 of them, trying to understand what is going on. Because one of the biggest challenges of this issue is, where's the problem? How big is the problem in my country? I don't know what to do about it. And we hear that a lot, right? That it's, okay, it's in Mauritius, or it's in Singapore, or it's in China, but we don't know the scope of the problem there, and we don't know what to do about it. And when you don't know what to do about it, you have other sort of higher priorities on your list of things to do that you can actually tackle, and you can show return on your investment for doing so. So that's where that's the human instinct. We're going to work on those problems. We need to show the scope of the problem in all these countries, have additional data that we can support, and then measure outcomes as we do interventions. And so we're working on that in the APEC economies as well. And I mentioned we're also doing some work on China and doing some research in China. So I'm very eager to partner with a number of folks to unpack and understand what we're finding in terms of the China internet pharmacy market as well. Number 4, Pharmacy is launching a great new development that I'm pleased to support, and the Alliance has been supported for a long time. Pharmacy, an operation that we manage primarily by NABP, the National Association Supports of Pharmacy, along with FIP as well. An international coalition supports Pharmacy. I like to call it the iTunes of online drug purchasing. If you're going to want to know how to buy medication safely online that's licensed and legitimate where you are located, you'll be able to do so through Pharmacy. It's not the only place that you'll be able to buy medicine, but it's a secure, safe place that you can buy medicine, just like you can buy music legally through iTunes. We had Napster, we had other things that were violating a lot of laws, and you could get viruses, and you could get your credit card information stolen. That's the internet pharmacy market today. No one knows where to go online to buy safely. Pharmacy compliant with the laws, certainly all the drug safety laws as well as importation laws, but it will be a safe place for patients to go to buy medicine safely and legally in their jurisdiction where they're licensed to do so. And then finally, ASAP's raising public awareness. We've heard a lot today, just recently from MAC, about how physicians don't have the differential diagnostic maybe rhetoric to ask the question. They're not quite sure when to ask the patients about where they're getting their medicine. So one of the things we're pleased to be doing this year is partnering with the Federation of State Medical Boards. FDA is also serving as a faculty member. You heard Tim Mackey earlier. Tim Mackey's also a faculty member, as well as LegitScript. We'll be putting out a free CME, a continuing medical education program, as well as a CPE, continuing pharmacy education program, targeting approximately 1 million doctors or pharmacists. We're hoping to get even more than that. But free credits, anybody that's licensed and has to have credits for anything knows at the end of the year you're going to be looking around for credits, and you probably don't have a budget for it, so you're going to be really looking for the free ones. That's what we're trying to hit, the doctors and pharmacists that need those credits, to just provide some really simple information about the online pharmacy issue, so then they know and are empowered to ask their patients the question, where did you get your medicine? If we could just get that question into the healthcare setting, it would be a big win, at least from my perspective. So that's part of our mission for this intervention. We're also going to do some pre- and post-test research on those folks that see the webinar, so we understand what did you know going into the webinar as a pharmacist or as a doctor, and then what did you learn coming out of it that's changing the way you're doing practice. So we will be reaching out and wanting to partner on this. We want to spread the word on this, this free webinar that will be forthcoming later this year. We're running advertising campaigns. I hear a lot, pretty much, at almost every conference, just about as much as Where Are the Bodies. I hear, where's the public service announcement? I want to see a commercial on this, Libby. I would love to have commercial dollars to do that. We are a nonprofit. We don't have that. Member-supported organization, and thanks to many of our partners who are here today. But we don't have millions and millions of dollars to buy advertising revenue. So what we do is partner with the search engines, Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft, to run search engine advertising campaigns. We've had 5.5 million impressions thus far. So if you type in "buy medicine online, no prescription," you should see in the yellow advertising box, "Be safe, buy smart," and it should link back to a URL checker that helps patients know which websites are legitimate or not. That we've seen has a much higher click-through rate than any other type of intervention. We've done videos, we've done links back to our website and other websites that have good information for consumers, but what we find is that consumers actually want to know if the websites they're going to are legitimate. And so the URL checker gets a much higher click-through rate because it's actually being used by consumers, so it tells us consumers want to know. We're seeing that it's almost double the click-through rate of other search engine advertising campaigns on average run through Google, Microsoft, or Bing, and we've had 5.5 million impressions to date. It's been running for about a year. We'll continue to do so with our partners at the Center for Safe Internet Pharmacies and Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo. And finally, we're talking about the issue. If you've got an event, I'm happy to be there. I think this is an important issue. As you know me, I'm passionate about it. So we are out and about, both domestically and internationally, talking about the issue. And with that, I'll just share with you our members who are kind enough to support our activities. As a relatively new nonprofit organization, we are member funded, as I mentioned, so we're pleased to have many in the audience here and observers as well. And with that, I say thank you. Look forward to your questions.
Thanks very much. Before I introduce Todd, I actually have one quick question. But the 500 more Dan Burks, will they all be redheaded?
Yes.
Okay.
And tall.
Okay, great. That's good. Good. Well, Todd of the Massachusetts Independent Pharmacists Association. Todd worked with us this year on investigating importation programs facilitated by municipal healthcare groups in Massachusetts, and has a presentation to share with us. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Dan. And I think I'm going to talk to you about programs in Massachusetts. I think the most scary part of this is that these are programs that are being promoted to the individual by their employer as part of their health benefit. So this isn't people just going on their own looking for these pharmacies. This is actually being promoted by their employer, and it kind of adds some legitimacy to these programs. We know that these programs are getting medications from foreign countries, non-approved FDA medications from foreign countries, and we know that there's a higher chance of counterfeit medications being obtained. So I'm not going to go over that because you've probably heard it a dozen times today, the impact of that. Why is this being done? You've heard a lot of that too. People don't know about the dangers. They're ignorant to that. They're unaware what this is going to potentially get them into. They're sold a tale of lies. They're being told it's safe, and we'll actually go over some specific examples of that. But mostly this is being done because of greed of the people involved in these programs. Not the patients themselves, but the other people involved with these programs. They're doing it for money. They know that this is not the right thing to do. They know it's dangerous, but they're doing it anyway. And patients are being misled to think that the medications they're getting from these programs are from quote-unquote safe countries. And I'll give you 3 examples of that. These are statements that are misleading for someone who doesn't know about the drug supply system. They think that it means that their drugs are coming from safe countries, but in reality, it doesn't mean that at all. And these are all out of the documents that we've received looking at these programs. And so this isn't something we've made up. These are exactly from these documents. So patients are told they're receiving medications from countries that have FDA-approved facilities. That's true. The countries that these drugs come from do have FDA-approved facilities. But nowhere is it stated, and nowhere is it guaranteed that all the drugs that come from these countries are coming from these FDA-approved facilities. So if you didn't know that, you would inadvertently think that they're all coming from these FDA facilities when they're not. They're told that there's marketing materials that the FDA and Health Canada have a memorandum of understanding for decades regarding drug safety standards for prescription medications. That's true. There probably is a memorandum of understanding on safety standards for prescription medication, but that has nothing to do with importing prescriptions from Canada or from these other countries to the United States. Okay, so once again, an unsuspecting consumer would make assumptions based upon this that are totally false and irrelevant to the information, to the situation here. And then lastly, these medications come from Tier 1 countries. Tier 1 countries have nothing to do with importing into the United States. Tier 1 status has to do with companies in the United States that want to import into other countries. Okay, but this vague statement makes people think that this medication is coming from a safe country and the medication is safe. And that's why these patients participate in this program. But let's step back and say, just assume for a second, let's say these are medications that are from safe countries and the medications are, quote, legit and safe. Just for a second. That's not the case, but let's just talk about that for a second. Patients have no way to check the license of these pharmacies, the license of the pharmacists. They have no way to evaluate the quality of services from these pharmacies. They're going into the situation blind. And then when they do have problems, they have no recourse. Okay? So even if they were from safe countries and it was safe, that's not a safe condition. The pharmacy or the pharmacist themselves has very limited or no ability to check for dangerous drug-drug or drug-disease interactions. So whether the medication is dangerous when taking another medication or whether the medication is dangerous with another condition that the patient has, the pharmacy has little or no ability to check this. And that's one of the most important things that happens when a pharmacist fills a medication. They look at that medication, they look at the other medications the patient's on, and they look for dangerous drug interactions. Or they look for other conditions the patient has based upon the other medications they're on, and they look for dangerous drug-disease interactions. Okay? That can't occur in this environment. Okay? And even in the United States, if the pharmacy doesn't have the complete medication list for the patient, when they send a claim to the insurance company does the same thing. Okay? So they look at all the medications and look for dangerous drug-drug or drug-disease interactions. Okay? So it's just more likely that this kind of interaction checking is going to occur when they use a pharmacy in the state, or they use a US-approved mail-order pharmacy, as opposed to these other online pharmacies. And then lastly, there's no ability to talk to a pharmacist if they have questions about how to take the medication, what to avoid with the medication. We know that patients not taking medications correctly costs about 20% of our healthcare dollars. Okay? And so we're promoting a system with no ability for a patient to talk to their pharmacist on how to take their medication safely. And so that's got to increase the cost of our healthcare expenditures. And then lastly, when these patients get these medications, pharmacies don't provide any safety packaging. So the waiver that these patients have to sign off on, saying that they waive their right to child-proof packaging. So now not only is the patient in danger, but potentially their children are in danger, because now they can get into their prescription medications. So how does it work in Massachusetts? I'll go over some specifics. So these are self-funded insurers that are cities, towns, school districts. So they're kind of governmental agencies that group into larger groups to purchase a variety of services. Okay? And so they're known as health groups or health trusts. And not only do they purchase prescription medication services, but regular insurance, dental insurance, vision services. And they do so to decrease cost and decrease administrative fees, which is a good thing. You know, they should do that. The problem is they're not doing it correct with regard to prescription coverage. And so in Massachusetts, these groups, and there's 5 of them, and we'll go over them in a minute, but these groups contract with a healthcare consulting firm that's located in Massachusetts called Group Benefit Strategies. Okay. Group Benefit Strategies then contracts with a for-profit insurance advisor, also located in Massachusetts, also owned by the same people, called Prescription Benefit Services. Okay. Prescription Benefit Services then contracts with a group in Rhode Island called Abacus Group that has developed a web-based tool called My Medication Advisor. And this web-based tool allows patients to put their prescription information in through the internet on this tool so that it can be reviewed. Okay. The information is reviewed by a pharmacist that works for Abacus Group, and that pharmacist determines whether that medication can be purchased cheaper in the United States or outside the United States at one of these online drug sellers. Okay? If the determination is that the patient can purchase the prescription through one of these online drug sellers less expensively, then the Abacus Group directs the patient to the online, quote-unquote, Canadian pharmacy, CannaRx. Okay? CannaRx obtains medications from Canada, United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. All of these countries, higher incidence of counterfeit medications, all the issues we've just talked about. The medication that CannaRx gets either from wholesalers or retailers is then shipped to the patient at no charge. Okay? And then CannaRx bills the health group or the health trust. These are the groups of these employers for each medication, and then the health group or health trust then bills the individual city, town, municipality for the medications that their patients or retirees have received. So that's how the program works. It's a little bit complex, so I did come up with a pictorial representation of it. So we have Group Benefit Strategies, who works with Prescription Benefit Services, who works with the Abacus Group and My Medication Advisor, which is the online tool. Pharmacists from my medication advisor review the prescription information, and when it can be obtained less expensively, directs the patient to CannaRx for their medication. CannaRx gets the meds from wholesalers or retailers in the countries that we just talked about. And then there's financial incentives for the patient. They pay no copay, so they get their medications free of charge. And the self-funded insurer, the city, town, or municipality, pays less than they would have paid for the medication had they purchased it in the United States. Okay. So that's how the program works. That's the incentives, that's the structure. That's why this is able to occur. There are 5 healthcare groups or trusts, and the first 2 are listed here. And these all have websites. You could go on there and look at it and review what's going on. These are the 2 largest. You can see they're pretty big. 20,000 members for the first one, 22,000 members for the second one. And then we have 3 smaller ones. Okay. And all of these health groups have, we don't know exactly how much participation in this program. It is voluntary, but we do know that it is significant because the health groups wouldn't continue to do it if they didn't have significant participation by their members. Here's a map of Massachusetts and the 5 health groups and the numbers of cities, towns, or municipalities involved. And so you can see the geographical distribution. I think we know it's between somewhere 60 and 70 different governmental entities involved in Massachusetts. And it doesn't just occur in Massachusetts, it's occurring in other states. Here is information that we have. We worked with PSM on this, and these are programs that in the orange are active, and in the blue or purple are currently inactive. And you can see most of it is in the Northeast, but there are programs in other states. And so the question is, where do we go from here? What do we do from here? Well, let me first say, the way we were able to get this information is we submitted Freedom of Information Act requests to the cities and towns involved, as well as the healthcare groups and trusts involved. And all of this information I'm presenting you today is either based upon those documents we received or information on the websites for the companies involved. So that's how we kind of got this information. And so the question is, where do we go from here? We're starting to have conversations with the FDA, and we're hoping we can convince them to intervene. From our perspective, but we know the FDA hasn't wanted to intervene previously on individuals purchasing drugs on the internet on their own. But from our perspective, this is different because it's being done through their employer as part of their healthcare benefit. And so we think there's a higher level of responsibility, and we think that this is a different situation, and we're hopeful that the FDA, could intervene in this case. We're talking to the Department of Labor, not sure if they have any authority over self-funded insurance plans. It's a little bit confusing right now. Our first goal would be to have one of those 2 entities intervene, because then we could wipe it out throughout the whole country and not just in Massachusetts. If that doesn't work, then we'll just deal with entities in Massachusetts, our state attorney general's office, our board of pharmacy, or maybe the individual health groups or trusts involved, try to see what we can do there. But that's going to be our strategy going forward.
Okay. Thanks very much. We appreciate that. Unfortunately, our hosts have indicated that we don't have time for Q&A, and I see by the thinning of the crowd that we probably could use a break, but I'm not sure if you can actually leave yet, though, so we'll talk. The next panel has to take over. But thank you so much, Mac, Todd, and Libby, for your insights. I think this was a pretty interesting presentation, and hope to work with you guys in the future. So thanks again.